ladies and gentlemen. We have with us Mr. Amit Malik today. I've had the honor of knowing Amit for over a decade now. Amit has over 2 decades of experience. He started his career in the year 1999. And since then, he has been playing an absolutely brilliant game. In his last stint with Aviva, he was the CEO and the managing director. And his mantra for leadership is that leadership is a choice and not a position. In our today's conversation, we are going to explore his philosophy, his life experiences, and what does it take to accept who you are, where you are, and how you are. Let's take a dive and know Amit. Thank you so much for joining. Such a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, Gaurav, for those fine words and introduction. Very good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world and watching this, and namaste, as they say from India.
Super. Amit, let's directly dive into the conversation. Very rare I've come across people, very rare. Somebody who has served HR, somebody who has headed HR, that he moves on and take over new challenges as the COO, as the CEO role in his life. How was your journey for you? How was it for you when you take over the role of a CEO at Aviva?
Well, before that, I will tell you, I'm not a path breaker here. There are people who made the path, and I'm very thankful to them, Gaurav, who initiated this journey. So, yes, I've been one of the few who had the opportunity to follow. Let me start and tell your listeners that I did not set out to become a CEO. That was never a career goal, right? But yes, couple of things that have held me strong or steady in this journey is, I think, first and foremost, is right from my first job till today, I've always tried to understand and be very focused on understanding couple of things is what is the business? What are we working for? How do we make revenue? Who is our customer? Why does the customer buy our product? So those are the questions that have always intrigued me. Whether I've been selling Horlicks in Eastern UP or Azamgarh or Chennai, or selling a credit card, or sitting in a bank lobby with a customer service executive and watching somebody, or selling an insurance, whatever. I've always done that. So that's really helped me, answer some of the questions and understand the business. I think the second is I've never let my role define me. My job description is just something on the paper that is there for someone to give it to me. I would rather look at my role. I've always looked at my role and said, what can I do to make an impact in this role? How can I fulfill the organization purpose in this role? And I think that's been very steadfast, whether it was the HR head or the chief operating officer or the CEO. The other interesting part of this journey has also been that, the perception, internal and external, like you said, an HR person taking over the CEO role. Not many people know that I also did a COO role for 3 years before I took the CEO role. But when I got the CEO role, a lot of people had this question saying, oh, they've given it to an HR guy. Maybe they are not serious about their business in India. Why would they give it to an HR guy? And what was very surprising for me always was that, people would never say that for a marketing leader or a finance leader or an operations leader or even a legal head, who's gone. But why would they ask that for an HR leader to say they've given it to an HR? Those are the couple of things.
There are some assumptions that go along with HR, probably. Since you're talking about COO role for 3 years, people find it extremely difficult to do one role of a CHRO in several organizations. And for almost like 3 years, right, you were serving 2 roles. What was the motivation behind that? And how did that help you?
I think first and foremost, when you're CEO and the board come to you and say, we really think you can do a COO role, and I think that's the biggest motivation, that one gets to be recognized and to be, acknowledged that you have the capability to do it. I think that itself motivates, that sense of achievement that is there, they have a confidence that you have the ability to do that. It wasn't easy for me. When I was given the job, I was very clearly told, you are being given it for 1 year. And if you don't make a success of this in 1 year, you'll have to choose either one of the roles. God was very kind. I did both roles for 3 years. I think the second thing that happened with me was I'd set up the HR team. I was already an HR head for 5 years. I had set up the HR team where I had started to make myself redundant. And I was asking the organization this question to say, what next for me? So I took that plunge and said, I will make myself redundant. I had a very solid team who I knew could support me, and could do more. And that does not mean I did not give enough importance to HR when I got both the roles, but it gave me the confidence to get onto this path of learning something new. And I think that's what gave me a lot of confidence. That also gave the organization a confidence to give it to me for 2 jobs. And what it also taught me, Gaurav, was it taught me to be very miserly with my time, which I think is a good learning. And I got that at that juncture, to be able to plan my day better, to be miserly with my time, and then to be able to, achieve it. It wasn't easy in the beginning. So I'll tell you a small anecdote. When I told my boys, who were at that time quite young, now they are 17 and 14. At that time, they were 14 and 11. My elder one said, "Oh, so you'll do 2 jobs and get paid for one? Interesting." And my younger one said, "Does that mean you will come home late?" And that's the view that people have. But very interesting.
Yeah, and the choices that we make and the priorities that we have. Since we are talking about the assumptions that people carry for HR, I'm sure there would be some truth to that as well. And I don't know what's that truth, if there is any. Now, let me ask you this question. What do you think? What are the traits that an individual needs to have in order to take on the role of a CEO? Probably, I'm saying probably, the HR might not be trained on.
You know, it's a tough one, to become a CEO, and especially. But I'll tell you, I think first and foremost, the trait is irrespective of what job you do. I'll come back to that point. Is you have to understand your business and your customers, and that is why I say that COO role helped me get into my job as a CEO from day one. See, one, I was an internal candidate, so there was always an expectation that I would deliver quicker, but I got through it one day. And I did that cross-functional role quite late in life. So people who aspire to be a CEO, I will tell them, irrespective of your function, you should do that cross-functional stint, not one, maybe two, much earlier in your career. So, that's my realization and learning. I think the second trait that is very important if you want to become a CEO in any organization is when you start to understand the difference between a functional head and an executive. And I give this credit to my boss earlier, Trevor, who was my CEO. He made me actually realize that there is a difference. When you sit on the management team, when you sit on that table, you can choose to be either a functional voice or you can choose to be an executive and an organization voice. And that is the differentiation that I realized, and I imbibed that learning with me. So I was first and foremost an Aviva executive rather than an Aviva HR head or an Aviva CEO. And you start to put, you change your own perspective about how you look at things and how you look at issues and how you look at solutions. That's a trait that is very important that people should imbibe. And a lot of functional heads do it, and a majority don't do it also. So I'll leave it there.
I just love it when you're saying that it's very important to create a distinction between, are you being a voice of a functional head, or are you being a voice of an executionist? What a beautiful distinction. Yeah.
The third point, and I think, this is where HR leaders have an advantage, which they acknowledge or not, is about people and process. That's a trait as a CEO. See, you have to understand that it's like an 80-20 principle. 20 to 30% of the people have 70 to 80% impact on your financials, on your business, on your. And I'm not saying the others don't contribute, but they have a major impact. And as a CEO, you need to then ask that question to say, do I have the right people? Do we know these roles as an organization? Second, do I have the right people in there? Because they will have the biggest impact. And when you come from HR, I think that's a trait that is your advantage, and people should play it out, very, very strongly when they want to make that transition. So I think these are the three things, people and process, functional and executive, and understanding the business and customer, I would say, would hold you good.
Also, you spoke about the roles that different people are playing in the organization and identify who are your horses. Amit, I remember our conversation, right? And if you remember during our last conversation, the coffee date that we had, you spoke about two transitions. We discussed two transitions: the transition from the role of a CHRO and the CEO, and the bridge was COO. And then recently, you have said goodbye to that position as well. So I'll talk about that. Now, let's look at the second plateau that we have, the CHRO, the CEO. What are the major challenges that you faced? Or what are the major challenges a CEO faces that only a CEO can relate to? And how did you deal with that?
That's very, very interesting. So I think as a CEO, first and foremost, what changes and what you need to start to do quickly is you are one of the few who's going to take a 360 view of the company, right? The company performance. There is sales, there is product, there is markets, there is competition, there is financial angle. right? And in an insurance company, there's also an actuarial and a reserving angle and an investment angle, depending on
mm,
what industry you come from. You are someone who needs to understand all of that end to end and have a complete picture in your mind. Because the decisions that you take and the decisions that come on your table have an impact on all of these elements. When you look at say, I'm only going to focus on
mm,
products, then you have to look at margins and how will it have impact on financials. If you look at sales, you have to look at the service element of it, saying how will that help. If you look at competition and say what is competition doing, you have to look at your own financials to say, are you geared up to be able to meet that competition. Now, that 360-degree view as a
mm,
CEO is very important, and that is a job that a CEO, I'm not saying no one else can do, but that a CEO must necessarily do, because he or
mm,
she is the one
mm,
who's take all
mm,
the costs that will have an impact. I think the second thing in that whole piece, which is very important, is your stakeholders change. And you and I spoke about that day on our coffee date, and I was
mm,
telling you, your stakeholders change. Your stakeholders is no more your CEO and your management team who you are going to influence. Your stakeholders directly today are the board, which are indirectly there when you are a CS. Today, your
mm,
stakeholders is your shareholder, is your board. How do they view the country? How do they view the organization? How do they view the market? How willing are they to be your partner in your journey? And how do you influence them? That's one part of stakeholder. Other
mm,
stakeholder is the external bodies, the regulator, where you are the ambassador for the company, you are the ambassador for the industry. And how
mm,
do you start to manage those stakeholders, and manage that reputation? I think that's the second part that I think is very, very important.
mm,
The third part is, as a CEO, it is your responsibility to ensure that your leadership team is on the bus. That's the first part, that the
mm,
leadership team is on the bus. And the second is, they are putting the organization above their function in the journey, like I said.
mm, mm, mm,
I think
mm.
that's the role that a CEO plays, and you can never delegate it to the HR head or someone else and say that's your problem to do collaboration, get the team together. No, you have to take the
No,
ownership.
yeah,
Those are the three things that I think are what I would like to say.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And thank you for bringing that element of systemic view, because as a functional head, I would have a very, very narrow view of things, how things are working. And you also spoke about the third challenge. I think unless I know how this one chord is going to change the music that will come from the other instrument, which at the surface level might not be connected, but at the deeper level, all these interconnected parts are creating a sound, which if it's not making sense to the external stakeholders, they are not going to invest.
Yes. Since you're talking about the orchestra, I just that just sparked a thought in me. So you are the conductor of the orchestra, but you don't have your back towards the world. You have your back towards the orchestra,
Hmm.
because you are also the face of the organization. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm. Thank you. And the other thing, while I was listening to you, I was reflecting that, of course, you spoke about the way your stakeholders look at you, the organization. I think also the way stakeholders look at you and your relationship with the team. I think because as a CHRO or as a COO, it's an indirect connection that you have with the stakeholders. Now you are the bridge between stakeholders and your team. I think that's really makes a huge difference. Is it possible for you to share one of those examples where you find it really difficult to navigate through these white waters and yet you were able to do it really well?
I think so when I started my journey, we were in COVID, we were coming back out of a period that wasn't very great, and there was this whole piece about how serious is the organization about the market, and then they brought someone like me to be the CEO, which raised enough questions. Internally there was a lot of belief and faith, but there are, so I think that was the time that I took it. And I when I presented the business plan, I actually got the whole team together to first have a one voice on that plan. And it was so aspirational that my stakeholders asked me this question to say, are you sure that we are geared up to deliver this aspiration? And I had the team with me, and before I answered, I first asked the team to share their views, and then collectively we made a point that let's aspire to do what we want to do and not be bowed down by the outcome of it. Yes, we may not aim what we want to aim, and I'm not giving you percentages because from proprietary reasons I can't. We were a regulated industry, but when we laid out the ambition, giving confidence that this is the team that is going to deliver on this ambition, right? And not one individual who's going to deliver on this ambition. And I think that helped the stakeholder to not only have faith in the team, but also to have faith in the business and invest to grow the business, wherein we got the green light to go and build a strategy for the next 5 years with an external consultant. And willingly they said, for the cost of building this, we will incur the cost as a stakeholder, not you as the business, which I thought was a great win for the team.
Now let's look at from the other perspective, your relationship with your team. As we discuss that it's not very often that people would expect an HR to take on the role of a CEO. Now, when you took over the role of a CEO, how did that change your relationship with others who were colleagues once upon a time?
That's a very interesting question. See, I think at one level, it changed overnight. At one level, it remained the same. And let me help differentiate. What changed overnight was that I was all of a sudden the boss, right? But they had already seen me play two roles. So, there was a lot of, the voice was already there, but I was all of a sudden the boss. So that changed. What remained constant was the personal relationship that you had. I was in the organization for 8 years, and as the HR head, I'd hired many of them. I had a personal equation. Good, bad, on whatever parameter, you have a personal equation. And I focused on maintaining that personal equation with them. But when you become the boss, you are the boss and you take calls which some people like, some people don't like. But I think what was interesting was that when I took the job, Gaurav, I was very aware, and I'd reflected on this when I was preparing, between the announcement and my taking over, that I needed to redefine my relationship with each of my directs and build a new one without the baggage. So taking the good part of my earlier relationships, but redefine that relationship. And that onus as a leader was on me, which I had to make an effort, which I did. But some of the people still carried the baggage,
of
which I'd
course.
expected, and it took them longer to adjust. But overall, when I took over, we had to redo the team because I was doing two roles. So we had to relook, relook. But overall, I think we got the right people on the bus. They may not be the best people, but I was very sure that they are the right people for the organization at that time when the bus was being driven. And for that journey, they were right. And that was the focus, to get the right people, even if they are not the best. I think that's what helped to understand.
Yeah. In all these years, one of the traits that I have seen you demonstrating is definitely your ability to not only build but sustain relationships. That is one. Second thing, I think your ability to call a spade a spade. I think that's what I've witnessed. I'm sure there would be other traits which are hidden from me, and I'm sure as we walk this path together, Amit, called life, we are definitely going to explore that. But I remember 10 years back also, in one of the conferences, you were speaking about purpose-driven leadership. Today also, you speak about purpose-driven leadership. I'm saying as good as last, 15 days back, we were sitting together. What do you think? How can a CEO create a culture which is purpose-driven? First, what is purpose-driven leadership? Second one, what can a CEO or what can a leader do to create a purpose-driven leadership?
I'll try and simplify it. Maybe it'll be too simple for your listeners and yours, but I like to keep it simple. I think purpose-driven leadership is an alignment between an individual purpose and an organization purpose. As long as you are able to see that alignment, I think that's what matters. And for me, leadership has various connotations, and everyone has a very different definition. But I always say that. It's not about what you want to achieve, what you set out to achieve. All that is good. They are goals, they are measures, they are metrics you measure. But as long as you have that alignment and saying, I work for this organization has a purpose, this purpose resonates with me, and I'm willing to give it my all to make this purpose happen for me, that's where the purpose-driven relationship comes. And I've always imbibed that. If I have not resonated with some place, sometime, I've always made the change quietly, saying, I'll go find something else to do. So that's one for me. I think, how do we make it happen, to the second part of your question is, that's a question that I'm going to answer more as an HR person than a CEO, but you can take it whichever hat. I'm still an HR guy, as I say at heart. I think it's for each and every individual to be able to see that linkage to the purpose of the organization. And I'll give you an example part of that I did. When I took over the COO role, I started to sit with my call center person and listen to the calls. Why the customers are calling us, what's the issue, why can't, what is it that is troubling them, what are the majority of. And this individual who I was co-listening the calls with was a veteran in our call center for 5-7 years growth.
mm,
He asked me this question. He said, you are such a senior leader, you are so busy, why would you spend 2 hours twice a week with me to listen to these calls?
mm,
What is it that you get? And that was my opportunity where I felt that there is a gap between his job and his impression that what he does is how important. So I had that conversation with him, and I'll relay this in 2 minutes. I sat down to him and said, look at what the purpose of the organization is. And
mm,
we defined the purpose. And I said, look into this purpose. This is so, we are an insurance company, and this purpose is so customer focused. I said, when the customer calls you, you are not answering a query. You are actually fulfilling the purpose of the organization by
mm,
giving him or her a solution. That is what we say, no? That is what Aviva's purpose is.
mm, mm,
And I told him, and I said, this will also reflect in the metrics that we will do. We had that conversation, and he and I then had a conversation on how that purpose gets defeated about, with the metrics that we measure call center on. And I've always believed that, the metrics have to be true. So we took decisions to take away the average holding time. We moved from average holding time of a call to the first time resolution.
mm, mm, mm,
Right. So we did those changes, and I'm just giving one example. We looked at what measures and we put that in to say, and that is where I think every time that I would meet people, in whatever role I played, I would try and define for them as to what is the role that they play. Similarly, my branch sales executive in a branch is far more important than a salesperson. And I'm not trying to, play one against the other. Is far more important because the salesperson has done the sales and moved on to the next customer. That's momentary. The customer service executive at the branch is the
mm,
face of the organization when the customer walks in. And
mm,
that's the experience that the customer will give when he refers our company to the others. No
mm,
one says, when you look at the feedback, no one says, I had great sales experience, so I'm going to refer it to somebody and buy another insurance.
mm.
Everyone's, when you seek feedback, they will say, great customer service, great product, great processes, timely. I think those are the experiences, and those are the functions who need to then understand their whole connection with purpose. That's for
Mm,
me.
mm. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And thank you for sharing all these examples. And it tells me about the different views that you could play with. The view of an eagle, at the same time, the view of a microscopic view, what we call as, right? So you could actually uh, zoom in and zoom out so that you can look at what's happening. And if there's a need to regulate up or regulate down or tune up or tune down, you could actually play along. Amit, in my understanding of knowing you as an individual, as a friend, as a professional, I've always seen you challenging the status quo. I mean, you will tell me that this is what you are doing. After 3 months, I'll meet you. You will say, this is Gaurav. Now I've disrupted this part of my life. Now I'm doing something else. It could be your relationship with your family, the way you take care of your health, from HR to CO to CEO. And then what are you doing, Amit, these days? Hey, you know what, Gaurav, I've left the company as well. Now what are you up to? I really don't know. I mean, I really don't know. These four words, they sound easy. What do you get when you challenge the status quo, which is more important to you than stability and certainty?
That's a very tough one. Let me, seriously, that's a very, very tough one. Let me break this question into two parts. One from an organization view and one from the personal view. You have touched both, right? I think from an organization view, it's not about challenging the status quo. It's about being aware of the changes in the external environment, the changes in the customer profile, the changes in the competition, the changes in the people capability, people expectation, the changes in the product. How is your customer going to look? And when you look at this as a leader, you also have to then start to visualize how will this impact the organization in next 2 years, 3 years, 6 months, 3 months, one legislation comes in, how it's going to impact. And then one needs to take that into account. And if that warrants a change, then one has to go for it.
Mm.
So if it does not warrant a change, then you continue doing what you're doing. But for me in an organization, couple of statements are red herrings, are very, 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 very hard. We have been doing this way. It has always worked in the past. This is how it is done here. These are very dangerous statements. So I
Hmm.
always tell people to challenge themselves. On the personal side, I think you know this, and we've had so many conversations, and I've always told you that even when I went through the whole process of understanding myself as a coach, reflecting, that I would always want to reinvent myself. And I think every 5 years, I've given myself 5 years to reinvent. So I did 5 years of HR head role, 5 years of COO and CEO role. And
Hmm.
I thought at my age, this was my time to reinvent myself. And as a chief executive officer, you have a responsibility towards the organization. You can't go
Hmm.
searching for a job or your next mantra while doing the job and then stand in a town hall openly and say, I think this is the best place and I'm going to be here for next 5 years and you should be here for next 5 years. So
Hmm.
I did that role till I did that role. I made that statement till I made that statement. That's why
Hmm.
I said when I leave my role, I will then go and explore the world.
No, but I can
And
tell you, Amit, there's one statement which is very consistent and constant. Every 5 years when I meet you, and you will say, Gaurav, if not now, then when? The same
yes,
statement you had then, and now the same statement you have today. And it's like
yes,
really.
yes.
So, Amit, let's take one step forward now. And that is where I would like us to take a pause and reflect because I really want to savor that. I really